Welcome to Frequency Bone Summer Music Connection 5, Session 5, Part 2, College. So it's taking us a while to get through the college years. They're very interesting years. As I said, years of, especially in the beginning, maybe starting over again in so many ways. You might be in a new city, new people, new coaches, new teachers, everything. So it's a lot to take on. It's a lot to juggle. You also are going to be possibly studying with the same teacher for 4 years. If that relationship is going well, where there's mutual respect, there's growth, there's enthusiasm, inspiration. Both of you have understanding. Be a fantastic thing. If, on the other hand, that isn't happening, might not be such a marvelous thing. So, what to do if it's not working out with the teacher you want to study with? If there's good communication between you, there's probably going to be a little something building in your relationship that won't be too big of a shock. If the teacher says, you know, this isn't working out, I really feel that what you want is something different than what I have to offer you. I suggest you study with so-and-so. Or, maybe even more difficult, is for the student to approach the teacher and say, I'm going to go study with... It's a difficult scene a lot of times, no matter how you slice it. Sometimes it just seems natural and it happens, but other times, no. And so, this is part of the growing up experience that college has to offer. And of course, this can happen way before someone comes to college. But it probably happens in college maybe a little bit more, just because of the intensity and the length of time of the student-teacher relationship, especially in the private lesson setup. Should someone be studying or taking lessons with a lot of different people if they're studying with someone for 4 years in college? There's a lot of different views on that. I say if it's going well with the person you study with, the student has eyes and ears. They're going to pick up other things from other people without necessarily having to take a lesson. I think a few lessons every now and then, maybe with someone else, isn't going to hurt anything, of course. But too many could be confusing depending on how different the teachers are. If they're extremely different, it's not going to be useful. If I had to study with Steve Zellmer and John Swallow all at the same time, that wouldn't have been useful. Very, very different. Both great, both loved music, both knew how to accept me as the person I was with my intense drive and didn't snuff that out, but just added what they thought would be useful or thought-provoking or inspirational. I remember one lesson Stephen Zellmer said, here, he charged $10 an hour, and this was in 1972. He said, you know, I've been wanting to do this for a while. Why don't you take $5 of this and go out and buy the recording of the great Russian virtuoso trumpet player Timofey Dakshutser. I almost cried. I was so happy. I was so moved that he did that. And, that was one of the greatest things for me, to hear that trumpet player, Timofey Dakshutser. There's someone playing like a violin on trumpet. I understand that. And the fact that Mr. Zellmer did that was so touching to me. But he taught very, very different than John Swallow. It was always kind of more Chicago in terms of making the air going and the sound always be free and full, longer side articulation, not too many short notes. And I had studied with Ron Ricketts, who was actually more similar to John Swallow before that, where notes were short and crisp, and there was a certain resonance in the sound and a certain flexibility, where Steve Zellmer had a very, very solid thing going on. One thing solid and still stated, with the music that was needed. It certainly wasn't stiff. But it wasn't as technically intricate as John Swallow or Ron Ricketts. And John Swallow, he was assistant principal in the Chicago Symphony at one time and principal in Utah. And then, of course, still playing principal in all these New York City opera and ballet in New York and all the things that he did with chamber music and solo playing. He had a real versatility. And so I was taking things from him. He didn't try to say, no, never play that big again. He was trying to just add other things. But you can see, depending on what you add, you can change that something that you had quite a bit. So then it's a matter of how you can weave things into what you already have. And certain things challenge your very foundation. That's an interesting one, depending on what you want to do. So, if the relationship is going well, I'd say stay with the person. You'll always be able to learn from other people, just by being at the school, listening to the other faculty. But for certain things, you really need to stay with the one person, because they might have a very clear, progressive path. And in my case, I try to tailor it for each person. It's not exactly the same for each person. There's similarities, but there's differences. So, picking a teacher is very important. A lot of people now are trying out teachers before they come to college, and that makes sense. Should one do other kinds of work outside of school and college? Well, you're going to have to a lot of times if you want more money. If you want to help your parents out with the loans. You might have to take a job, maybe a work study at school, but maybe something outside. I would think it'd be great if students, even at the undergrad level, start teaching. I've had some terrific students who, of course, started having very, very big freelance careers in New England before they were, graduated. Starting in their sophomore or junior years. In fact, one of the biggest things I personally miss from being in the Boston Symphony or Boston Pops more is the fact I used to take students who I thought were ready or close to ready to handle that circumstance and have them play a Pops concert with me. I think that was really a great experience for them. And of course, a couple of them ended up staying and playing with me for many years. But only if they were ready. So teaching, doing other kinds of music performing outside of school, I think is wise, as long as you can juggle it. There's where it gets tricky sometimes. But if you can, I think it's important. Build a little studio in some school, if you can. Do a couple freelancing things, if you can. I think it's wise, actually. Maybe some teachers don't think so. I do. If someone's ready to do that. Real experience outside of the enclosure of school is important. Then you start to see how different school was, and then in another way, how not so different it was. What about grad school? Should someone even go to grad school? That's a very personal choice. I think in this day and age, if someone wants to teach, good luck teaching without a doctorate. But if you don't have a master's, at least, it's going to be really, really tough. I've had some terrific students who are excellent teachers get turned down for not having the master's. So the graduate school, again, maybe for some people it turns out to be a starting over thing like a freshman in undergrad. I've seen that happen. If not, it's a time to really prepare and refine even more the things that need to be tweaked, that maybe you're not spending the extra time on, to expand your horizons of the orchestral, chamber music, and solo literature, and a lot of the more difficult etudes. And which brings up an interesting thing about literature. What should be covered in college? Well, if someone wants to be in an orchestra, I think a lot of the major excerpts should be covered by the teacher and with the listening of excellent recordings of those pieces on the student's part. Going to live concerts, of course. And certain studies, I would think really getting into things like Arbenz, Koprash. I work a lot out of the Pasquale Bona rhythmical articulation book. Looking into the Rochus, getting more into the advanced Rochus of Book 2 and Book 3, even though Book 1 ain't for slouches. And of course, then there's the Butri, Beach, and Bozza trio, that if you can look into those, that are great. I also think Top Tones for the Trumpeter by Walter Smith is excellent for the trombone. The Bach cello suites. Playing the Rochus, if you don't like the word Rochu, Bordoni, more accurate. Play them in different keys, of course, different registers. It's been going on a long time. Charlie Vernon helped bring that alive in a big way. But very useful. Very, very useful. I would say don't wait till your senior year in college to play a recital. I'd say do one or split one every year with someone, even from a freshman. And if not, then at least from sophomore and junior years. But back to literature. There's a lot of great solo literature, and this depends. Trombonists have a lot to choose from these days with solo literature. You might want to go and just try out for some competitions. You might want to start taking auditions. Should someone take auditions in their college years? Yes, I think. If the teacher feels they're ready, I think they should. No one could have talked me out of taking an audition, and no one did, except Gunther Schuller one time tried to. He wasn't successful. But that's something, some students really try to do that too soon. And it's clear it's way too soon. And I will tell them very upfront, you are not ready to take an audition for the Chicago Symphony, or the San Francisco Orchestra, or the Detroit Symphony. Okay? Why don't you stick with some of the local orchestras around here and music festivals? Those are excellent ways to prepare for auditions. So, college, depending on where it is, you could really be juggling a lot. Things in school, things outside of school. Expanding your repertoire. Really trying to make way for you to have a career in music. Now, here's one other point I also suggest to look at in college. I always loved teaching as much as playing. There's something in that relationship where watching someone grow and ignite with something that's so wonderful. And that if I can help assist in that process, that special magic that should never be lost. I feel very humbled and honored to have shared that with them in their life. At the same time, I'll say to someone, look, can you arrange things? Can you teach? Can you compose? Do you like music history, music theory? Maybe you need to have some companion arts with you, as well as your instrumental playing. And I know a lot of people now, they'll do work on Finale for other people. They're starting to build a little teaching studio. They're setting up, having freelancing work and doing music history and doing this and that and running a little something here. It seems to be the way of it. And I think if you can have at least 2 or 3 things that you do well, that you start cultivating in your college years, maybe if it's not right away in your freshman, sophomore, junior years, maybe start thinking about it in your senior and grad years if you go to grad school. That's a personal choice. If you really want to teach, I think going to grad school is very important. So that's a little bit. And I hope that was enough of the college years. Anyone has any questions they want to ask me about it, please feel free to write comments or email me. And we'll see what our next session of playing through the years will be about. Hopefully see you soon.